try not to get scared. Scariest stories. What a nice day to be a StuG III commander, I says happily. Little did I know I was now a Hetzer commander.
The Hetzer is a very strange machine when you start looking at it. And I don't just mean that it looks like a prototype of the Cybertruck.
No. Wait.
While all other tanks and tank destroyers in the German army were getting bigger, the Hetzer was a relatively small and light vehicle for the time of its production. And while it might seem strange when you look at all the other tanks and tank destroyers that the Germans had, well, there was a very good reason, which we will look at today. So the most successful tank destroyer of the Second World War, at least in terms of kill count, was the StuG III, or StuG III. Even though this is not a tank in the traditional sense, it is more commonly classified as a turretless assault gun or a tank destroyer. The StuG III was a highly effective anti-tank weapon during the Second World War, claiming more kills than the Panther and the Tiger combined. Some estimates suggest that the StuG III destroyed around 20,000 enemy tanks during the Second World War. However, this fun was about to abruptly end for the Germans. On the 26th of November 1943, the RAF organized a massive night raid, with its main target being Berlin. However, due to some incredible luck, some navigation errors, and some bad cloud coverage, many bombers dropped their payload north of their intended target area, which turned out to be a happy little accident, because instead of making a few Germans homeless or bombing some cows in a field, they accidentally destroyed multiple factories, including the one that was producing the StuG III. And because of this incredible luck by the RAF, the monthly output of the StuG III basically crashed, going from 255 StuGs produced in October to just 24 being produced in December of 1943. And with this factory out of commission, they had to find a new place to produce the StuG III. German High Command first looked into the possibility to produce the StuG III at the BMM factory in Prague. However, it was quickly noted that the factory in Prague wouldn't have had the facilities to work on the 24-ton StuG III, with the factory being unable to lift a completed vehicle. And instead of just giving up, it was decided to make a sort of stopgap. And that is where we finally come to the Jagdpanzer 38, better known as the Hetzer. Now, technically it was never called the Hetzer during the war, at least not in German official military documents. There were a few wartime documents that used the name Hetzer. The name could have also come from the Hetzer E10 prototype. And that for some unexplained reason, this name stuck to the Jagdpanzer 38. There are also some sources claiming that the German troops and Allied troops started to call this thing the Hetzer, and then again others say that this name became popular after the war. Whatever the case may be, I will be calling this thing the Hetzer for the rest of the video for two reasons. One, it's a lot easier for me to say Hetzer instead of Jagdpanzer 38, and two, it will upset a really small portion of the people that are watching this video, which is pretty funny. Also, before we continue, do you like military history? Do you like still old memes that are outdated? Do you hear a certain beeping in your head saying to push the subscribe button? Then you should definitely subscribe to this channel. Also, if you didn't hear that beeping, please leave a comment and we will come and fix it right away. Anyway, the BMM factory was mainly producing the Panzer 38 light tank, a design that was already heavily outdated. Now, even though the Panzer 38 was heavily outdated at the time, it was proposed to use the whole of this tank for their new vehicle. They took some inspiration from the Mir, a Romanian tank destroyer design, which showed some potential, but it's unclear if it was ever tested in combat. With one prototype that was allegedly briefly used against the Soviets, though it didn't have any combat successes. So let's assume for 1 second that they did use this thing against the Soviets. That is less than a glowing report. Now, this might all smell like a very bad idea, using an outdated hull and unproven design and then smashing it together. But it actually worked out a lot better than you might expect. The development of this new tank destroyer went surprisingly fast. The best way to show this is to show it in a timeline. So, the bombing of the StuG III factory was on November 1943. In December 1943, only 1 month later, the design was approved, and in January 1944, the drawings of this vehicle were already finalized. And in the very same month, a 1:1 scale wooden model was built to be demonstrated in front of officials, meaning that the development of the Hetzer only took 3 months at best. Which is really depressing to think about, because if I think what I accomplished in the last 3 months, and then to think that there were people that designed a tank destroyer in the same amount of time, with the German bureaucracy in the background, yeah, I should probably do something with my life. Once the final design of the Hetzer was agreed upon, the BMM factory was awarded a contract to produce 2,000 of these vehicles. However, the Germans were still in need of more of these vehicles, so Škoda was also awarded a contract to build another 2,000 of these vehicles.
Škoda, simply clever.
And it didn't take very long before the first Hetzers rolled off the production line, with the very first ones being completed by the BMM factory in March 1944. Now, because of the fast development of this vehicle, it had some, let's just call them some quirks. For one, the gun was installed in a fixed mount without the ability to rotate independently, meaning that the whole vehicle had to move when you were aiming at the target. Now, that is not that big of a deal, seeming that the StuG III and other German tank destroyers worked in the same way. However, one thing that those tanks didn't have, and the Hetzer did have, was that the gun was slightly offset to the right of the vehicle. And this offset gun meant that there was too much weight on the right side of the tank, which affected the right track suspension. It also meant that this vehicle had a chance to tilt. So to make sure that this vehicle didn't tilt, 850 kilos of crew and equipment had to be placed on the left side to offset the weight of the gun on the right side. So as part of that, on the left side you had most of the crew. The driver, the gunner and the loader were all positioned on the left side of the vehicle, all in one line, one behind each other, with a slight offset. The commander, however, was on the right side of the vehicle, directly behind the gun, which I doubt was much more of a comfortable experience. To put it lightly, the crew comfort of the Hetzer was a joke. Hetzer crews reportedly hated the interior space. It was so cramped in there that if the loader and the gunner weren't communicating and coordinating with each other, they would literally elbow each other into the face. So you have these men into a tiny box that is really cramped. But it gets worse, because the visibility for the crew was also poor, to put it lightly. The driver had 2 angled periscopes built into the upper front armor for frontal view. The gunner only had a fixed forward sight to aim the main gun, and the loader had a periscope to watch the left side of the vehicle for threats. Even though this might have been an add-on for later versions of the Hetzer for the Swiss army. There was also a roof-mounted machine gun that could rotate 360 degrees and was aimed through a periscope. All in all, very limited for the crew. One of the better options that the crew had to see what the hell was going on outside was the commander his scissor periscope, which he could only use when the hatch was open, which basically forced the crew to have the hatch open whenever they could, and only close it during serious threats like artillery fire or mortar attacks. Talking about those kind of attacks, the Hetzer also didn't have much protection for its crew. On paper it all looked pretty good. The frontal armor of the Hetzer was 60mm thick and sloped at a 30-degree angle, which gave it an effective thickness of around 120mm, which again sounds pretty good. For comparison, the Tiger I's frontal armor that wasn't sloped had an effective thickness of around 100mm. So on paper this made the Hetzer's frontal armor very strong. However, due to the situation that Germany found themselves in 1944, the quality of the armor was very low. Much lower than anything that you could find on the Tiger I or Panther. With some sources claiming that the 60mm plate that was used on the Hetzer was actually about as effective as the 30mm armor that was used on the Panther III. And the front was the most protected part. Things didn't get better when you came to the sides or the back of the tank, with the side rear only having 20mm of this low quality armor. And even though this armor was sloped, it was only good for protection against small arms and shrapnel. The engine was also slightly underpowered for what they were hoping to achieve. The engines were very similar to the ones that they were using on the Panzer 38T, but it was upgraded. Instead of producing 129 horsepower, it now produced 158 horsepower. Which is good news, seeming that the Germans wanted this vehicle to be relatively fast. But at the end, the vehicle only reached a top speed of 40 km per hour, which was with ideal conditions on the road. This was less than the designers were hoping for, but it didn't help that the vehicle was a lot more heavy than they expected. The vehicle weighed 16 tons instead of the proposed 13 tons, which affected the speed. Despite these issues, there was actually one area where the Hetzer really shined: maintenance. Unlike other heavier vehicles of the German army, which basically needed a whole workshop to just change the oil, The Hetzer was relatively small and easy to fix. 2 crew members could replace a tank track on their own, and the engine was also fairly accessible. Another positive thing of the Hetzer was its gun, which was pretty good at the time. It used the 7.5cm PaK 39 L48 anti-tank gun. This gun could pierce the armor of the most common allied tanks at a range of around 1000 meters. However, that is enough compliments for the Hetzer because there was one funny little mistake that they made with the gun. So remember how the gun was placed on the right side of the tank? Well, this gun was kind of designed to be loaded from the right, meaning that the loader was stationed on the wrong side of the gun to work it. To open the breech, he had to lean across the gun to reach the lever.
Can't make it, the shit's stuck. Out of my way, son! Door's stuck! Door's stuck!
And not only that, but not all the shells were stored on his side. Some of them were kept on the right, which meant that the loader often had to reach over the gun and the recoil guard to grab a round in what was already a very tight space. Now, hearing all of this goofy shit, you might be surprised that the Hetzer performed relatively good, at least if it was used correctly. So the Hetzer performed the best when it was used as an ambush weapon, and not as a vehicle for attacks or counterattacks. But luckily for the Hetzer crews, in 1944 Germany didn't do too many offensive operations anymore, mainly being on the defenses. And that was exactly where the Hetzer performed the best. Hetzer crews were instructed to find a firing position, preferably behind a wall or some cover, or lay hidden concealed, for example by the edge of the woods. Once a juicy target had been engaged and there were no more targets available, the crew was instructed to drive to a different position to avoid enemy artillery. And as an ambush vehicle, the Hetzer performed remarkably well. In one case even being able to take out an IS-2. German reports from the Eastern Front reported how 4 Hetzers managed to destroy an IS-2 from around 120 meters away. The Soviet tank fired 10 shots and missed each and every one of them, most probably because of the low profile of the Hetzer and because they were in a perfect hold down position. Once the crews of the Hetzer saw an opportunity, they managed to flank the IS-2 using cover and took it out with only 6 shots. Now, to be clear, the Hetzer was never designed to take down these kind of Soviet heavy tanks, and this encounter in real should have ended something like this.
Hello fellow users, I am a hip relatable brand.
Silent brand.
But still, it showed that with communication between the crews, the Hetzer still performed remarkably well. There are also many reports stating how the front armor held up surprisingly well, even the side armor. But I think I can explain that with just this image, so let's just move on. Because there are also more than enough examples of this tank performing just bad. Especially when it was used in attacks or counterattacks. A role that this tank was never supposed to have. But in 1945, I mean, what other options did the Germans have? For example, during the Battle of the Bulge, 295 Hetzers were deployed, and in the first 15 days of the battle they already lost 88 of these vehicles. So in conclusion, the Hetzer was a flawed machine with many quirks, but when it was used correctly, it could perform remarkably well. Surprisingly, the end of the war didn't mean the end of the Hetzer. After the war ended, the Swiss were looking for new armored vehicles, and you can guess one time which vehicle they chose. So yeah, the Swiss placed an order to receive Hetzers, renaming them to the G13. The first 10 that they received were literally German specification Jagdpanzer 38 tanks. The rest of them were newly built vehicles with Swiss specifications, with later vehicles having newer designed parts, making them slightly different than the German World War II version. After service with the Swiss army, many of these vehicles were sold to museums and private collectors, who converted them to make them look externally like the World War II Hetzer. Anyway, that is about all that I have about the Hetzer. If you do enjoy this kind of content, then go check out some of my other videos. And if you want to see more of it, then make sure to subscribe. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.